Now for our What in the World segment. The U.S. Department of State released its annual report on human rights around the world. It covers nearly 200 countries from Tunisia and Egypt and their uprisings to North Korea and Cuba and the repression in those nations. The report is an annual State Department tradition going back nearly 4 decades. And for the last 13 years, it has been followed immediately by another tradition, a rebuttal. China has released its own report on America. It says Washington is full of overcritical remarks about the world, but it turns a blind eye to its own woeful human rights situation. So let's flip through the two reports. The China section of Washington's publication begins by listing state-sponsored killings, political arrests, known cases of torture and disappearances. The State Department's report says Beijing does not respect civil liberties. It documents known restrictions on freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and censorship. Beijing's report, by contrast, talks about the Occupy Wall Street movement, that its protesters were treated in a rude and violent way. Okay, not sure how that's a human rights violation. Beijing's report points to the homicide rate in the U.S. It goes into great length on how the U.S. is a world leader in gun violence. Again, that's not really a violation of human rights. That's what human beings sometimes do with rights. It may be bad public policy, but it's not tyranny. But let's not simply dismiss Beijing's report. On the contrary, I think it would make fascinating reading for Americans because a lot of the problems the Chinese point out are indeed real problems, whether or not they are violations of human rights. The report points out, for example, that with 5% of the world's population, we own between 35% and 50% of civilian-owned guns. That's crazy, and it should make us all pause. The report says the United States has the largest prison population in the world per capita and the highest rate of incarceration. 1 out of every 132 Americans is behind bars. This is true, and it's a terrible indictment of our justice system, one we should fix. The Chinese report criticizes us for high unemployment, for a widening gap between the rich and the poor. Again, not a human rights issue, but an important critique of American society. The report goes on to criticize our healthcare system. It says 50 million Americans lack insurance. It reports we've cut spending on education. School budgets in New York City have been cut an average of 14% a year for the last 5 years. The Chinese say minorities suffer disproportionately in America. 11% of Hispanics are unemployed. 16% of African Americans are jobless. The report cites inequalities between the sexes, saying women get paid 77 cents on average for every dollar paid for men. These are all issues worth examining, discussing, and when possible, improving. America has many problems it needs to fix. We've put up a link to the Chinese report on our website so you can read what it has to say. Of course, it would be equally important for the Chinese public to read the State Department report on China. Now, could a Chinese news network put it on its website, maybe? No, of course not. The report is banned in China, and any website that would dare to publish it would be censored and punished. Now, that's an abridgment of freedom of expression. And this is a message to the Chinese authors of that report on America. That is what a violation of human rights looks like. We'll be right back.